What's great conversation you're about to hear? Hello, everyone. This is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page. I'm an online event planner that supports artists' work from all over the world. They create the product. I help them plan and execute a memorable event for their fans, family members, and friends. What do Chick Webb, Philip Glass, and Tony Braxton all have in common? They hail from the great state of Maryland. But how could we leave off the indie darlings Velocity Girl? You remember these titans of guitar pop musicians who composed addictive tunes such as My Forgotten Favorite, Crazy Town, and Sorry Again? Well, they are back with high voltage enthusiasm. They just wrapped up a super memorable show at the Black Cat 30th anniversary event on September 9th. In this conversation, we're going to explore some questions such as how did this band come together? What kind of musical training did they have whilst climbing the music ladder? How did their experience with legendary producer John Porter go making the Simpatico album? What was it like being on stage again in front of a lively and captive audience? And how does it feel to dust off some analog tapes only to be released later back out into the world on Bandcamp? Let's not forget they have some vinyl pics to share with you all. Clearly, they still hold plenty of appeal in the music world, including me. So enjoy my conversation with Velocity Girl. Hello, everyone. This is W.A.K. William, host of the High Art on the Edge public event page. Thank you for tuning in. This is a wonderful surprise event that I've been eager to share with you and now has arrived. I have retraced some steps and connected to some music from the past that I have fully embraced, and that is with a band called Velocity Girl. The last time I saw them was in San Francisco many moons ago, and we are so fortunate to have them part of this conversation. Jim Spellman, Archie Moore, Sarah Shannon, thank you so much for being part of this High Art on the Edge experience. How are you all doing?
Right.
Doing good. Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So in this conversation, I'm going to kind of start, we'll kind of retrace our steps going back to the beginning of Velocity Girl. And then we'll talk about some albums that you have released. And then, of course, this latest and greatest show that you put on, and any future shows. And then we'll wrap it up with some vinyl picks, and then we'll be done. So, Jim, I want to start with you. I'm going to throw you, I like to throw some, softball questions, hardball, curveball, but here's a question for you. Velocity Girl, what do you think people think of when they hear those two words? What comes to their mind?
Well, I hope that that they think of our band, and I hope that they, feel that we were able to kind of connect a lot of bases, melody, the sort of sonic stuff, noise, reverb and stuff, as well as, kind of some energetic kind of songs that people like. But, I don't know, it's been fascinating since we've been somewhat active again the last few months. People seem to connect with the band in lots of ways that I sort of don't anticipate them doing. So I kind of leave it up to them more than us.
Archie, would you like to elaborate on that?
Oh yeah, and to what Jim said in the end there, that's been really shocking to me. Like I've always been sort of in the band jerk, or the bossy guy in the band, and the guy and our worst critic. Like, I don't know if you ever watched Adventure Time, but Jake the dog on one episode was in a band, and he said every band needs an asshole, I think. And I was like, Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV going, yes, that's it. But with that context, the show we did last week, we did a reunion show in DC last week, and afterwards I was I think we were all incredibly moved by the response because it's, you know, it's obviously it's a nostalgia fest, but I think we were kind of confronted with this fact that like our music meant something to a lot of people. Like you know, people were telling me, I've been wanting to see you since high school or something like that. So it was a big deal for us, and it kind of has recalibrated my idea of what the band meant, like in a very nice way.
And we will definitely discuss that show and all the good vibes and sentiments that came with it. Sarah, let's go to you. What do you think? What do you think of when you hear those two words, Velocity Girl?
I'll do combo Jim and Archie. I mean, the mechanics of what we do, you know, noise and melody. And yeah, what Archie said and Jim brought up somewhat too, the surprise of how we connected to people's, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna go for a big word. We connected to people's hearts. And yeah, like it meant something to somebody, and you remember, you know, you remember those bands that, you know, gave you the chills or made you want to move your body or made you want to pick up an instrument. And so being able to reconnect with people on that level has been amazing. And you just, I don't, yeah, having all those people show up at the Black Cat and kind of carry us along, you know, I felt like they were with us, and it felt really good. And so yeah, whatever Velocity Girl means, we connected it there in that moment at the Black Cat.
I cannot wait to get into that discussion. Jim, give us a little bit of the background, the history of Velocity Girl, if you don't mind.
I'll let Archie do that if you don't mind, because Archie was in the band originally, and myself and Sarah came in just a little bit later.
Go for it, Archie.
Sure. Velocity Girl basically came out of a band called Goddard Democrats, which was Kelly Riles, who's now Kelly Young, and I, and our buddy Bernie Grindle at the time, who lived in a house with me. And initially we were just kind of messed, like, are we allowed, what's the language situation with the podcast? Like I'm a curse, or, but if this is like for
Oh, you can speak your mind, express yourself however you like.
We just fucked around initially as like as a noise, like we really did not know what we were doing. None of us played instruments or anything like that, so we were one of those bands that was just banging on stuff for a while. And we invited my friend Bridget to join the band at some point. I think it was shortly after we had all seen My Bloody Valentine come through the 930 Club in 1989, like summer of 1989, because we were all completely obsessed with the You Made Me Realize and Isn't Anything, and like the stuff that was out then and the previous stuff as well. And seeing them live just sort of galvanized us to change from this kind of dumb noise rock into something maybe a little with some tunes and more of a textured sound. So we changed the name, and yeah, Bridget played second bass as well as started singing some songs. And after a little while of that, we had kind of melodies going on. And then I saw Jim here, and I didn't really know him, but I saw him in the line at the food co-op at the University of Maryland on the student union. And he just came up to me, and we had put out a compilation record at that time on a record label we started called Slumberland Records, and it was just a 3-inch compilation. It was recorded in our basement, one song recorded on a boombox, the other two on my cassette 4-track. And Jim came up to me in line and said, "Hey dude, I like your record," and he kind of offered to sit in with us and play drums. And So we had him over, and this kind of coincided. I think this, I mean, in my mind, maybe Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but like we had just started working on a song called I Don't Care If You Go, which we were kind of excited about. And from the first time Jim played with us, we just, we kind of sounded like a band and everything, where we had a real backbeat and cymbals and stuff that we hadn't had before. We'd just been banging on drums, and that was instantly our kind of 5-person lineup, and an excuse for us to start booking shows at the local clubs and things like that. And Jim's always been sort of the I believe Sarah referred to it recently as the band daddy. If I was the band asshole, Jim was the guy who
That's right.
Jim got us shows early. Like he pushed us to like go do shows, and I think most important, that was very important, but most importantly, he got our asses into a studio. And there was this guy Barrett Jones, who's like we went there because he had done like Pussy Galore early record there or something, but we went there and recorded 4 songs, and I was kind of hooked at that point to the recording thing. I still didn't understand it at all. Like I was like, why do we need 8 tracks? Like there's drums, there's 2 people on guitar, there's bass. What, like, one vocal? What do you need? Like, what do you need all that stuff for? But yeah.
Let me chime in if you don't mind. So in 1985, I saw in 1985, I saw Jesus and Mary Chain at the University of Maryland in that same building. And Psycho Candy was like this huge record for me, but it was like nowhere present in music in Washington, DC that I was like aware of. And there were lots of other bands as well, but that was really to me a sort of like this real archetype that I was drawn to. Pop songs, but all this kind of chaos and noise and distortion stuff. And so I was in high school then when I saw that. But then as I started playing in bands, totally surrounded by DC punk rock, hardcore music, and that's my friends in bands played and stuff that was offshoots of that. And there was all this amazing stuff happening, Fugazi especially, in the time when Philosopher was coming together. But like I knew in my heart that playing that kind of music was just not for me. And then I saw Velocity Girl, not God or Democrats, Velocity Girl at the Student Union at some sort of goofy show there, right? Archie, something like that. Yeah. And I was like, it really hit me, even though it was very, primitive and all of that. And then I got the record immediately, and I'm still to this day completely impressed when anyone puts out a record. Like it seems like a miracle, but that really seemed like a miracle. And I don't remember that I had any big ambition, but I was not a drummer until like a couple weeks before I played in the basement. I mean, I screwed around living in houses with drummers, but I'm like a guitar player, and I was playing guitar in another band at the same time. But it really seemed like this golden opportunity to weasel my way in to this thing, and nobody else was doing that. Like there was no room for another bass player. Like I think that was clear. Already 2 of those. I can't sing, so like this seemed like a good opportunity. And I remember that first night in that playing in the basement very well, and it seemed really easy. I think we played a show 2 weeks later or something like that at TC Space, and that part of it never really seemed hard. Then from then on, making music with Arch and with Kelly, and then there was this transition, and Bridget left, and Bernie went on to grad school, and Sarah came in, and that was the band.
Bridget went on to,
and then Brian came after
Brian,
Sarah.
Sorry, yeah, Brian. Yeah.
We always forget Brian.
He's so quiet.
Yeah.
Sarah, I want to ask you this question. Tell us about your experience growing up with music. Was that something that was always immersed in your household? How did you become such a appreciator of music, and was that passed down?
Yes. So I've come from a pretty artsy fartsy family. My father is a visual artist. My mother is a singer, and she went to college when I was about 12. So like in her late 20s, early 30s. And she was a DJ at GW. So just my dad and my stepmom, yeah, they had a record player, and we had the Beatles and Bowie and Ella Fitzgerald, and all the good stuff for your ears. And then my mom was more into kind of new wave, Blondie, Cheap Trick. My first concert. This is a good. I have a good bragging rights here. My mom took me to see Blondie at Meriwether Post Pavilion when I was 12, and we went to the hotel afterwards. That's the kind of mom she was. And I remember, yeah, we were waiting at the hotel. I don't know how she got that information. I don't know if she was working at the radio station at the time, but we were waiting for them, and they just sort of breezed up in their suits, and looking a little hazy. Just, I remember one of them had a wine bottle in his jacket. Yeah, so I was steeped in it. I was, was playing in my house, and my mom was taking me to see concerts from a young age.
So when did you start noticing, become more aware of your actual vocal talent?
That was a very clear day. I always just sort of sang along in the house. And I didn't understand if I had a voice or not. I felt like I could sing along with the melodies as they were written. But I tried out for a play in 6th grade, and I sang a song from Brigadoon. And it was a little bit of a like bunny rabbits turning their head. All of a sudden people were like, "Oh," and I kind of was like, "Huh." And I kind of found it out in a very weirdly public way. Trying out for that play, I got the lead.
And so that from that kind of moment, that was the impetus, that was the catalyst?
Yeah, and then from then on, I was like, well, I can sing. People seem to like it. I love doing it. Feels really good. And then from then on, it was, I was in choirs. I was in plays.
You have opera training?
Yeah, and then choirs, and then through my high school choir teacher, I was in regular choir and show choir. That was a big deal. And my show choir teacher, asked me she said, "Have you ever had any training?" And I said no. And she recommended a teacher whose base happened to be in opera. And my choir teacher just said, it doesn't matter where you want to go with your voice. If you get a basic training in opera, you'll have a really good foundation. So I studied opera in high school and then through college.
Okay. And you must have enjoyed that experience.
I loved it. It was hard. I mean, I had to take music theory classes. I wasn't great at school. Music theory felt a little like math to me. And I didn't really do good in music theory until all the rules were thrown out the door. And we did, the last semester was atonal music, which is really weird because I'm a pretty melodic person. But that was the only class I got an A in.
Hey, that's okay. Yeah. I've been, as I mentioned before, the teacher for 23 years, and I used to tell this to my elementary school students, as cliched as it is, people just find their voices at all different parts of their life, and it's a shame that school can kind of pigeonhole and lock kids in it and don't let them just be who they need to be and kind of express themselves. And it sounds like you had an upbringing that allowed this and really nurtured this.
Yeah. But like I said, it was that thing of just saturation, music was playing
Right.
constantly. And then, yeah, my mom kind of brought in the more hipster element and college radio aspect. Um, and yeah, so Archie, do you remember we met way before we were introduced as me as a potential lead singer? Do you remember we met in the record store?
Yeah, absolutely. That I'm sure that's part of why we would have you would have gone to the front of the list when when Jim suggested you.
Yeah. So I actually met Jim through, I didn't know Jim through University of Maryland. I met him through a friend at AU. And so I think that I knew there was this kid that came into the record store, and I don't know how, like, maybe you made the connection. Oh yeah, Sarah used to work at the co-op,
Mhm.
but that was like
A
before
lot
I
of
joined the
co-ops
band,
in
right?
Maryland, by the way, food co-op and record co-op.
Record
That's
co-op,
right.
right?
Two co-ops.
Both very important in the history of Velocity Girl, apparently. So
Apparently, yeah.
I love it. Archie, what about you and your training? When did you start really gravitating towards music?
um I I was a Kiss fanatic at 10, and then I kind of did I mean, hard rock radio was kind of what people in my suburban existence listen, young boys and stuff listen to. So I went from Kiss to Van Halen and Rush for a while, and then in high school I liked some David Bowie stuff, and my mom got my sisters and I tickets to see David Bowie in 1982, and
Cool.
it's like
Wow.
overnight I became like a Bowie obsessive as well as like a new waver, because the hard rock station in DC 101 would also sneak in like New Year's Day and Sunday Bloody Sunday, or I loved the first few In Excess singles that from their Shabu Shaba, their first album available over here, The One Thing and Don't Change and stuff, and that stuff just kind of flipped my lid. And then so but because, well, the reason I mentioned that transition is because I went from liking music that was unrelatable to me, that I could never imagine making, or something that existed in a different world that was unattainable. I sort of got the impression with like U2 and In Excess and stuff like that, that this stuff sounds like I could possibly figure it out. And then by the time I was in 10th or 11th grade, I see you're wearing a Bunnymen shirt, like the Bunnymen and New Order and the Cure and then the Smiths. I mean, that's still to me, I mean, some of it I really do believe is probably hormonal or whatever. It's just the age you're at, but that's the music that is stuck with me the most for my entire life, and that I still like. It just sounds like music that is right, like all in capital letters or something. And then went to college and fell in with college radio, and then discovered a different kind of music that was completely right. The like indie pop and the kind of proto shoegaze stuff like Arcane and stuff like that. And then of course the My Bloody Val, the fizzy pop of this post Psycho Candy stuff. Jim was talking about Psycho Candy. There's a whole bunch of Scottish and UK bands that kind of were inspired by that and made this super fuzz pedal cranked up pop song music, and I was obsessed with that. And from there also heard Beat Happening, and I'm almost done with this story, but like Beat Happening was the final thing where I heard their early records and went and saw them play in 1988, and like literally that night my friend Mike and we went, and we, much to his neighbor's chagrin, we played music like at 1 a.m. or whatever. Like that was pretty much the first time I was attempting to make original music at all.
Jim, did you have any formal training? Did you
Not at drums. No, I took guitar in high school, public high school guitar, and guitar 1 and guitar 2 in 9th and 10th grade. And that was pretty good. We learned like the same cowboy chords. I write all the songs I write now with still. And it was good. My teacher was great. Joan Racky was her name. I'm still in touch with her.
nice?
And it's very similar to Arch. Kiss was the first thing. Right around the same time as I got into Kiss, I bought from TV. I phoned in and ordered this Beach Boys best of thing on 8-track. And but then it was like, like Arch said, Van Halen, and I was more into metal, Scorpions and Iron Maiden, Wabam, New Wave of British Metal, Saxon, a bunch of stuff like that, which really seemed like the most kind of high energy, kind of exciting sounding stuff to me. And then it was so a friend of mine played me the Ramones, and that totally blew it open. And then it was like this complete immersion. That was when I was in 9th grade, into figuring all that stuff out, pre-internet, going to a record store, asking, trying to follow all these leads, and, going down a few wrong paths. But we were fortunate to have a lot of good record stores, several good record stores in DC. And I would go to one that was sort of close, and I would take a couple buses to this record store where Arch and I ended up working, called Yesterday and Today, and worked my way through like the Ramones, the Sex Pistols, the Damned, Wire, Buzzcocks, and then a lot of the American stuff that was happening, hardcore, Minor Threat and stuff like that, but especially like X and the Replacements and Husker Du, the kind of American kind of parallel thing that was going on, and it probably took me a year to catch up, I guess, to kind of the current. By 84, I bought the Replacements, Let It Be, one of my favorite records when it came out, and was buying Smiths records when they were coming out. I saw the Smiths in 85, was a huge show. And all that stuff kind of fused together, I would say, probably as well, in the late 80s and into early 90s with like oldies radio, because there was the hard rock station, there was black music stations, go-go in DC, and then there was this alternative station which really didn't become kind of bigger and easier to hear until later, but there were a couple oldie stations, and stuff like Tommy Rowe and Tommy James, the Shondells, and Motown, and especially like the Jackson 5, and all that stuff was like amazing stuff to listen to, which probably started a lot for me because I didn't have something to listen to in the car. I didn't have the cassette I wanted or whatever. I listened to that stuff, and I think a lot of that stuff really seeped in to form kind of a version of music education by the time ended up, kind of playing in a band.
Okay, so we're going to move quickly into some of the previous albums. Wherever we want to go with this is totally fine. We could talk about Copacetic, we could talk about Simpatico, but I want to open that up to any of you right now. Looking back and hearing those albums, what comes to mind?
I want to make a correction. I realized I said my mom was a DJ at GW. It was George Mason. Wrong George.
Got it.
It's a minor one, but if my mom listens, she'll be mad at me.
Noted.
Well, when I think of going back through the records, I haven't particularly reappraised or thought much still about the last 2 records, but we've been in the middle of this big project digging up old tapes and stuff, and the Copacetic album, and then there's really like an album's worth of material before that, more or less. And those 2 phases, I've really reassessed a lot in the last couple of months, where I'd either not thought about them, or there's aspects of them I knew I kind of had put them in this slot in my brain. I don't really like that. And I've come back to really appreciate the kind of energy in them, the adventurous, nature of the sounds and stuff that we got. And and also I feel now like I can acknowledge how hard we worked in those couple of years, like an insane amount of work, of songwriting, of playing shows, of going into the studio in this anytime we could kind of this rolling thing, you know, doing all in really just a couple of years, what, 3 years time, 2 years time, this incredible amount of work. And as I sit here right now, I'm really proud of all of that stuff, in a way that I don't think I was open until these last few months. It's been a great experience.
Were there any particular tracks, Archie, Sarah, or Jim, whoever wants to answer this? Let's go to Simpatico. That was on Sub Pop, is that correct? Simpatico?
Yes.
All of our LPs were on Sub Pop. Yeah.
Okay. So were there any tracks on Simpatico that just were very challenging in composition, the arrangements? Were things just not kind of coming through? Or was that album, things were flowing, things were just kind of manifesting themselves in a natural way? Can you give us a little bit of that experience?
I'll jump on that one if you want. I think I'm curious if everybody else agrees, but I remember I think our headspace at the time, at least mine was that this was our second record. We
John Porter.
Yes, with John Porter from the Smiths, which was a huge deal. And we had done our first record, and we did it really quickly, and I think we were all proud of it. Like, that was a record that, you know, your first album, typically in the history of a rock band, you might have several years to accumulate your best songs, and you release them as an album. And I think we were proud of the batch of songs that we had on our first record, but we I think it, to all of us, maybe it just didn't feel like we thought it was gonna, like, it didn't end up being the record that we thought that maybe we had imagined or anything like that, mostly for sonic reasons. But when we started doing Simpatico, my memory of it is that, like, we were really focused, and we were kind of we had figured some things out, although when we got into the studio with John Porter, we were about to figure out a whole lot of stuff. Like, we would literally be cutting minutes out of our composite, you know, we'd be cutting minutes worth of sections out of our too long arrangements, which sound hilarious to me when I listen to Copacetic now, where it's like, why did we just keep doing that thing? Oh, why did we do that 4 times without any words or anything the whole time? So I remember it being like all of us were kind of just throwing parts and songs out, and everything was really cool. Like, I still remember, like, when we were coming up with, like, the intros to Sorry Again and I Can't Stop Smiling, and it's like, we've kind of figured out a thing. And I mean, I hear that now retrospectively on Copacetic, that I didn't believe this about myself at the time, but in retrospect, I really believe that we had a point of view and a perspective that was different than just about any band, like, certainly in the US. I mean, we were very Anglo-centric kind of, but we did, with that though, we were an Anglo-centric band who had grown up in Discord land, and I think that just, like, seeps into you somehow, so that, like, there's a certain, not that we necessarily achieve this, but there's a certain challenge to be, like, on live and stuff like that, so that you gotta have a certain tempo maybe, and you gotta move when you're on stage and things like that. And so we didn't real like that pushed our music out of straight downstroke shoegaze kind of stuff into its own kind of energy thing. But I remember Simpatico being, like, to me, it felt like a triumph of us quickly coming up with a big batch of songs. And I think we even had a leftover song that we had started recording, and just a band, like, I think John Porter was probably just getting tired of, he was like, why don't you just do 12 songs or something?
Yeah, go ahead.
When we were doing that record, so when Archie's talking about the drum stuff, so about editing stuff out of these songs, like, when you do this today on Pro Tools or GarageBand or anything like that, you know, it's this long line of colors on the screen, and you hit the blade tool and cut it, and, you know, but then it was literally this big 2-inch piece of tape that went this big reel-to-reel thing, and they cut it with a razor blade, like, on the beat, you know, like, and it's nerve-wracking as hell to watch them do this ridiculous primitive, and they tape it back together. Like, it's crazy.
And yeah. And do you remember the walls would be covered with like 15,
so you cut out
15
like
bars at a time? Yeah.
Yeah, you cut out the verse from this take and you put it on the wall, and then you put on this other reel and you get the bridge from this next tape, and then you try to line them up in order, then reassemble them. And so the song, our song, There's Only One Thing Left to Say, has this kind of shuffle kind of feel, and I just could not get it. I was at my lowest probably ever in a recording studio doing that, because like everyone was counting on me, and it had this feel, and I couldn't do it. And partly in retrospect, like I didn't really ever kind of get the feel until it was edited, and then I was like, oh, that's the feel. Like I just couldn't. There was this big thing about what it was, and I couldn't execute it. And that is 19 pieces of tape that form that form that song. And I have an envelope. I actually have this envelope that has one of the abandoned pieces of tape, and I wrote something like, open this in the time capsule in the future in the year 2020, and and I have that. But it was extremely the level that we were holding ourselves to by hiring John Porter to hold us to was a massive leap up ahead from our really kind of I mean, when we recorded the stuff Arch talked about, we first went in this guy Barrett's studio. I didn't even own, I'm not kidding, I didn't own a drum kit. And then there was at least a session or two after that when Bridget left, and like we didn't own a bass, or and we like borrowed, like, how can be a band, we don't own a drum kit, we don't own a bass, like, but we like, there was a lot of charm to that. But this was like, there's no charm. You're gonna do real music work here. And this other thing too was on our song. I believe it's Rubble. Rubble have this break that goes dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
And that's the intro to this Jimi Hendrix song, I Don't Live Today, that I used to play when I was just behind the drums. And John Porter was like, mate, like that Hendrix bit, hang on a second, play it to this. And he was like, I don't know, click, or giving me the time, and I played it, and he recorded it a couple of times and edited that into those breaks. Do you remember that?
I forgot that. That's amazing.
Yeah. On that, it was incredible. I think probably there was no experience that probably upped my game as how I view all this than working with John Porter. That guy's amazing.
Sarah, let's go to you in your, rear view mirror perspective here. That if you want to talk about Simpatico, I'd love to hear your kind of memories of that and working with the band or John Porter.
Well, one of the big jokes in our reconstituting the band is I didn't remember anything. And part of that is because I don't like to listen to my voice, my recorded voice. So I don't listen to our stuff except for when we're performing it live. But I do remember, making the record and writing the record. And I remember it seemed to be really percolating and bubbling and going, pretty gangbusters and coming together, except for probably a few little skirmishes and disagreements here and there. It was really percolating. And like Jim said, John Porter just brought it all together. And Jim mentioned that what was it called? Was it Bo Diddley? The Bo Diddley beat being a rough one for you.
Yeah.
I think Kelly and I had a couple times when I don't know if John ever like walked in to the room and like showed it to you, but like I remember he was trying to get me to do probably a harmony. I just couldn't get it. He got
it was Meteocore, right? The last line. Yeah.
Just one. Yeah. And he's like, it's this note. And he like plunked it on the piano very angrily. And it had already happened to maybe, I don't remember Jim, you're feeling rough about that part, but I know it had happened to Kelly with one part, but there were some woodshed moments where we were piecing it together, and at times coming up short and kind of having to really step up, to use a cliche.
I have to ask you, and I totally understand it. Why don't you like listening back to your voice? What is it about that experience? Or do you like sit there and nitpick and go, oh, I should have done this?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just and it's just part of my makeup, extreme self-consciousness. Yeah. It's yeah. Go ahead.
I have extreme self-consciousness aware, but I also have this kind of self-hating thing where I'll I'll force myself to listen to what I know are my worst like just to remember.
With singing or with guitar?
Yeah, particularly with singing. Like I mean, the noisy guitar stuff, I've always felt like, well, that's so easy to fake that I feel pretty okay with all of that stuff. Like I mean, I think we would all admit that's the plum gig in Velocity Girls doing
But really, I think that in general, though, singing, your voice is obviously such a more personal thing that also you can do things differently, but ultimately it is your voice. There's no knobs but that stuff only goes to a certain point where you're not going to feel the same personal thing about playing rock drums.
Yeah, unless you're a super expressive like a real musician. Also, I think that your voice is the instrument that you're gonna like your self-confidence and things like that are most exposed, where like you could tell if somebody is too meek to, like I hear the first couple Slumberland singles and I sang on the B-sides of those, and it's like I could barely get air out of my mouth or something, and that's
so
I remember Sarah telling me, well, on some vocal or others, like you have to open your mouth more when you you have to open your mouth wider when you sing, and that was something I tried to take to heart.
Yeah.
Simpatico to me is very reminiscent, and forgive me, but it's a high compliment to like bands such as the Bats, the Clean, the Chills, that New Zealand kind of sound. But what's so extraordinary about that album to me, and I don't know if this was the vision of John Porter and all of you collaborating, in my personal opinion, your ability to write that 2 to 3.5 minute, 4-minute pop song with phenomenal energy, phenomenal hooks, phenomenal melodies. Was that the intention going? Because it seemed that that wall of noise had been removed a little bit, and really going for that sharp, like, as I call it, pure pop for perfection.
Yeah. Well, can I address that one first for a little bit?
Yeah.
Just because
I imagine that's hard to do.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the Flying Nun stuff, because when I think of Simpatico, I remember at the time, and I think this was a general thing in the band. It wasn't just me. I think a lot of us were looking back to like the Smiths and Echo and the Bunnymen and New Order and thing. But it's very interesting that you picked up on the Flying Nun thing, because I mean that's some of my all-time favorite music. And we have a song called The All Consumer on that record, where Brian's guitar part, it's basically Block of Wood. It was directly inspired by Block of Wood, where Brian's going bah, 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 and then I start playing on top of that kind of and we weave that together, and that was very Bats inspired. And yeah,
that's great. Jim,
interestingly, I didn't know a lot about those bands. I like them a lot, but so when I put together my Apple playlist to practice, you know how Apple, I guess if you've got an iTunes account, they'll extend your playlist.
Okay.
And so those songs, those are the songs that are coming up in my when I just forget to turn off the playlist, that stuff will come up.
Jim, is writing an indie pop tune again, my opinion on that album. You know, you you just you name the song. You have Drug Girls, Tripping Wires, you know, like Rubble, Labrador. Is that a huge, arduous task to write such beautiful pop tunes?
You know, I don't know. It seems like there's always like, you know, a handful of songs that turn out pretty well that are easy that you don't struggle with. And then there's a few that maybe you kind of apply some, you know, craft to. And then there's always a few that are kind of struggles somehow, you know, that it just can't quite, it takes forever to find the thing or something. But I think that, you know, the singles, Sorry Again and I Can't Stop Smiling, I don't recall those being difficult coming together. I think they were kind of a breeze. I think it's a little more of kind of like the album tracks that we struggle with, because not struggle with, that are a little more work because you want to add some sonic variety, different feels, and that can feel a little like you're on less stable ground than you know, like going for like big hooks. Not that if we didn't have more songs with big hooks, we weren't burying like songs like that, but it just feels like a lot of those songs that, you know, people connect with I don't think were really that difficult for us to put together. That's my memory anyway.
It's a phenomenal batch of tunes, and it holds up beautifully today. I don't want to rehash all the, you know, the album stuff, but any final thoughts on Gilded Stars, Simpatico, anything you want to share about the past? You know, go ahead, now's the time. And then we're going to move into this new concert experience.
I'll just say that Gilded Stars and Zealous Hearts, I've been really shocked how many people comment kindly about stuff from that on our somewhat new social media accounts that we've just started, you know, a few months ago, leading up to this stuff, like shocked. And because the general rap is that like that's the least good album and it kind of flopped and all that stuff. But I don't know, a lot of people, you know, a lot of people seem to really like a lot of the material on it. I've been too occupied with other stuff to spend much time thinking about it or listening to it. Particularly, I know there's a lot of good songs. I think that as a band, we were less cohesive, you know, less of a operating as a unit maybe at the time and stuff. But I'm it's very endearing when I hear people that seem genuinely moved by a song that you know, I just thought, you know, like no one liked. It's definitely kind of a little ego boost or something when someone's like seems to really have like a strong connection with a song that, you know, maybe I hadn't given that much thought to in a long time.
Is I want to talk about, thank you for sharing that. I want to talk about this performance, this show that you recently did, the Black Cat, this 30th celebration.
Yes.
Yeah.
30th anniversary.
So let's go with that question. Archie, you want to take that one? How did this come about?
It's funny. I think probably everybody in the band, or at least the people that are kind of visible on social media, have probably all gotten random requests over the years where people are asking, you know, can you guys consider getting together? And I think for the most part, for several decades, it was the kind of thing where we probably didn't even bother mentioning it just because logistically it was impossible. And I don't think we were, maybe we were at this jaded donut hole age or something where it wasn't as appealing. This punk rock person from the DC area, I think she's in Philadelphia now, Katie Otto, contacted me about potentially doing a Velocity Girl reunion for a big DC kind of punk reunion festival she was putting on. And I brought it up to the band, just sort of due diligence. And right away we realized we couldn't do it because Brian's family was going to be in Iceland. But that sort of got it oddly sort of got a little ball rolling. And at first, it's funny, we decided Sarah was going to be in town, so we just met up for the first time. I think we hadn't been in the same room probably since my wedding or something, which was like 2007 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a nice time, and we took band photos and things like that. And we had gotten an offer. Jim had gotten an offer from Dante the Black Cat asking us if we wanted to do that. And I think we all went into this meeting probably figuring it was not likely to happen. And we sort of just went around the table, and I think various people called the other people's bluffs as it went around. And by the end of the evening, it's like we were ready to accept that. And I still didn't, I mean, I didn't have any idea that it was going to be received the way it was, or anything like the news that we were doing it, or the performance itself. So it was still a very like these are people in our mid 50s reforming our band. I mean, it's kind of pathetic on some level. you know you know like I'm talking about just us that night or whatever, where, it was really fun seeing everybody, but it also felt kind of like, hey, we're getting the band together, we're gonna post a photo of it tomorrow on social media. And from there on, you started seeing glimpses of people being happy about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Sarah, I got to ask you this question. So tell us about the process of now knowing that you're going to be on stage. What kind of homework did you have to do to retrain?
Ah,
I'm gonna have to
well,
mute my mic so I don't laugh the whole time.
yeah, I know. So I was very ill prepared because I hadn't listened to this stuff in a decade. I had really, I think when it had come up, the most recent was with my kids. They're like, "Mom, is this you?" And yeah, so I was extremely ill prepared, and even in that first practice, when I had crammed on the airplane, I was very ill prepared. But they and you know laughed at for not knowing anything, rightly so. But these guys brought me up to speed, and they had obviously been working on their chops, and I was like, okay, yeah, you got to get it together. And I was a little bit worried about my vocal range because I sing pretty high on copacetic and simpatico, and I was worried about a couple of the songs that we were definitely gonna sing. And I just started vocalizing every day, just warming my vocals up. And I found that it's just like exercising. The muscles came back, and I won't say that it's where it was in the 90s, but I found them for the performance. I think they were there as strong as they could be.
Well, I've seen some of the YouTube clips, and Jim was telling me about when we had our pre-event conversation that he was super impressed. And in the YouTube clips, obviously I wasn't there, but it gives me a nice snapshot and a glimpse into that experience. Jim, so what was that experience like, just being back on the stage with the band? And I'm sure ravenous fans waiting for you.
Ravenous. One of the things that I'm very glad of now, sitting here right now, is when we decided to do this back in June or whenever it was, we decided we were going to do it. We said that we were going to kind of take it seriously. We were gonna, practice. We were gonna make sure the guitar sounds were right and all of this, and I think that really paid off because we practiced kind of a lot, for relatively speaking. And so I felt pretty good musically. It was definitely surreal a little bit. And I think my favorite little personal moment while I was kind of just in my own thing, like I don't want to fuck up. Don't let me be the one that fucks up, but at the end of my forgotten favorite, Sarah used to do this thing on stage where she would come back to the drum kit and grab a stick and hit the opposite symbol of me for the last four or whatever things. And I had forgotten that, and she came over to the drum kit at the end of that song and it made me just so happy. Also,
Nice.
partly because, okay, I already made it through the hardest song for me to play, so but it made me really happy to see her there, and that's really when I kind of relaxed. But then the real impact hit me when I looked up and and saw all these people, and people were just really seemed genuinely involved in it, and seemed to be appreciating it, and it was really humbling, I would say, to do it. And then on the way home that night, I had 3 friends from out of town. My daughter was with me, and it was like all this stuff going on. And my daughter was like showing me like Instagram
Yeah.
clips, and I was like, "Oh my God!" Like Sarah's like on fire. And there's one, and it's an iPhone from 5 feet away, but I'm like, "Oh my God, Archie's guitar sounds phenomenal," and I just was like, "Oh my God, I can't." I'm so glad that we decided to do it, and to be a part of it. It was I'm still almost processing it a week later, because it was just this cathartic kind of really wonderful experience. It gave me so much appreciation for the other 4 people in the band, that I probably have not taken enough time to be appreciative of, back in the day. It was a really beautiful experience. So the next 2 shows will probably fucking suck, but but it was just really wonderful.
don't think so. Archie, what are your thoughts from that experience?
Well, I think the thing that Jim was getting at about Sarah was that Sarah, like, I had, and this was something that I made a point. I was explaining it to people who hadn't seen us before, like my kid and stuff like that. I was like, Sarah never did that before. Literally, she stalked the stage, and she held her hand above her head, and she held the fucking straight stand up into the air, and she took the mic off and things like that. So that was a blast, because I got the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like a very joyful performance. Like it seemed like you were really really feeling the love and working from it. And I was, from where I was, and this is me all the time, all I was hearing was my mistakes and things like that.
Oh no.
But then, like, when I mean, I had the same experience with Jim. Like on the way home, I was checking out social media, and I think I'm just lucky for several reasons. I think Sarah and I are both lucky that nowadays they've figured out how to, like, the videographers come to the front center of the stage. Because I'm a guitar player on the stage right, I have the cool angle where my headstock is pointing towards the camera, and
Yeah.
my amp, so their camera is pointed at me and my amps, and it's picking up the sound of the amp. Like, it just sounded really, I'm like, my guitar sound is really good. I cannot believe this.
Also, I mean, it's really a massively different phenomenon. All 3 of us have played in bands to different degrees since then, but it is a massively different experience to then, like, minutes later, have people in the front row with wide angle lens video cameras capturing every moment. It's been really great to be able to watch all those clips and be there, because I'm the one person for sure, the drummer, that never gets that view. I just see everyone behind, and it was really great to be able to experience that through those people's cameras.
What an inspiring moment. What an elevated moment. Like seeing all that. And then plus you couple that with the audience reaction. What a great experience. So I understand you have another show or 2 coming up. When is
Yeah,
that?
we're gonna play at the Bowery Ballroom on September 30th. And from I mean, I don't know. I went online, and I don't want to say it out loud, actually.
Oh.
Somebody else, I don't know.
We're
Maybe
hoping
this
it's
is not
sold
something
out,
wanna
because we
say.
were
it's
really
sold out.
concerned about it, but we think it may have sold out. So,
And I've already, of course,
Thanks. I
gotten
wasn't
like
sure.
5
I think
messages
that might
from
be my
people saying
kid.
it's sold out.
I'll be right back.
Uh-oh. Where'd she go?
The Bowery.
You can come in though. Come on in.
So, and then you have another one after that in December?
December 2nd, we'll be back at the Black Cat.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to say something super quick about the kind of my energy performing,
Yeah.
because I want I'm not a super confident performer, and I've spent the past 10 years, no, 15 years doing children's music. A full rock band, fully amplified, but we play for children. So I think number one, I'm just going to be brutally honest. I learned how to not drink before shows. I used to just have a couple glasses of wine to calm me down. And that's very unseemly to do with children, but also it's just kind of, something that I'm working on myself. So I learned, I kind of overcame my nervousness by moving around a lot. And I found that that kind of took the edge off, but then I just sort of started leading with that when I was performing for kids, and I was like, well, fuck it, I'll just do it. I was so nervous. And I was like, I'll just do it here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to hurt anybody if I'm moving around, and then the audience was just right there, and it's like
I was
when
going to
you
say the audience probably picked up down there in seconds.
yeah, and it's like when you're if you're performing and it's getting feedback from the audience, and I could feel the band, they weren't saying anything to me, they said something to me afterwards, but I could feel the connection with them, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and lean into this. And it was the band up there with me. It was the fact that I think they were sounding better than ever. And yeah, they just it just wanted the words are also cheesy. It's just like I felt complete joy. I felt complete like the audience was holding me. It was really an uplifting, connecting experience.
I love when you just said leaning into that. I used to tell my students all the time, we do a lot of performance-based activities to immerse themselves in the academics. And I would say, okay, you're going to feel that moment on stage when you're going to feel that connection, lean into it. And they would say, well, Mr. Frederick, when is that? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know when it's going to happen for you. And if it doesn't, that's okay. But if it does, embrace it and go right towards it. That's wonderful. Okay, we're going to wrap this up with a few more topics here. I want to talk about this stuff that you released on Bandcamp. This ABBA version of my forgotten favorite, Warm Crawl. Jim, I mentioned you love that mix there. This massive undertaking of going back through the analog tapes and really exploring all that stuff again. Whose idea was that, and who's really taken charge of that one?
Well, I think we had all had ideas about well, we haven't mentioned in the interview yet, but the cat's out of the bag. We're in the finishing processes of remixing our first album, Copacetic, and that's what I think that's something we'd all maybe individually and probably brought it up with each other before, mentioned the idea of, oh, I wish we could do that. And when these show ideas came up, I think in the very first band email, it was like a 2-part thing where I'm like, okay, we've been asked if we want to do this DC punk rock thing. And also, I think, what do you all think about looking for our master tapes for Copacetic and seeing if we can get them transferred and do a remix of it and see if somebody would put that out? And right off the bat, everybody was like, yes, on remix. And in the process of that, this was the beginning of an emotional roller coaster that we won't go into the whole thing just because I know we're taking up too much time or anything, but it was probably 6 weeks of us. Would you say 6 weeks, Jim? Maybe of us we tracked down a bunch of tapes right off the bat, and those were very exciting because it turns out we had analog masters of our first singles and things like that. We had sent DATs, these crappy sounding 16-bit tapes. That's what we would send to the recording plant, but we were making mixed down 1/4-inch backups at the same time, and we found the multi-track reel with the individual instruments and everything for our first recording sessions. The sad part is we apparently recorded over the multi-track reel for our most well-known single, the Forgotten Favorite. So that one, you know, we found the mixed down tape, but we don't have the multi-track for that. But we found all this great stuff, and we're like, none of this stuff has been on streaming. Like we had a Slumberland compilation in the 90s on CD that compiled it, but it's never been on streaming. And here we have superior sounding master tapes of the same material plus other stuff. We have to do something with that. So we sort of got the ball rolling on that while we were still hunting down the multi-track tapes for Copacetic, which we asked Sub Pop to find it, and they when they eventually got back to us, they said, we've looked in our storage facilities and we don't have them. And I just assumed, knowing all of us, I just assumed somebody in the band like threw it out or like we've all had changes of, we've all lived in different homes and things like that, lived with different partners and things like that, and there's just so many variables involved. I thought they were gone forever, and Jim came through with it. And
yeah, I'm sending all these messages to the band saying, you got to look, man, maybe it's here, maybe it's there. They were in my ex-wife's mom's house, my former mother-in-law's house the whole time, where I had sort of outsmarted myself, because I remember then, you know, whatever years ago, going, they'll be safe here. They will be safe and stable and dry and well preserved here, versus me. I'd moved to Denver for a while and around and stuff, and so it worked out. But I'm still embarrassed that it took me so long to remember.
you know, it's whenever you say that, I just keep thinking, oh my God, I almost cried when Jim sent me when he sent me the photo where he sent me a preliminary text that said, hey buddy, or something like that. And then the next one was a photo of 2-inch tapes. Like it was like, like my heart exploded when I saw it. I couldn't believe it.
It's funny, when I went on to Bandcamp and I was have you read people's reactions to some
On
of these?
Bandcamp, actually, I'm not
Oh,
sure I have it.
Yeah,
I
I
have
did.
not.
Yeah, so
You
setting
should
the
check
night on
that
fire
out.
with rock and roll. It's like, I mean, people have written really nice things, like, you know, what a great surprise! Thank you from blah blah blah. My favorite, my Forgotten Favorite has always been one of my favorite songs. I listened to new version over and over. This mix really lets Sarah's vocals shine. Blah blah blah. Really nice comments. I imagine so okay, so how long are we going to go and do this for? This sounds like a Fugazi thing to me, because you know Fugazi used to go back and do all this stuff and bring back their demos. Is that kind of the route we're going?
Well,
We don't have as much material as Fugazi, do we?
yeah. So right now, I mean, there's that batch of stuff that came out, and then we're going to do a greatly expanded, like twice as many songs, I think, something like that, version of that the Slumberland compilation with the rocket ship on the cover.
Nice.
But that covers most of it. That probably covers all the releasable stuff. Like so between that EP was meant just sort of as like a taster, like our dipping our toes in the water, letting people learn that we've found some tapes and things like that. But basically there'll be 2 big projects, hopefully coming out in a reasonable amount of time. One, the Slumberland compilation, and then we have a new stereo mix of Copacetic and kind of bonus tracks that were contemporaneous, B-sides, outtake, Sub Pop single of the month, that kind of thing, and it's all been remixed. And it's been I think basically, I think it's been remixed with more of the idea of what you were mentioning, the Flying Nun stuff.
Yes.
For our first record, I think I love that stuff, but also all of the nascent shoegazing stuff of the you know, we were all huge fans of Ride. I loved Pale Saints in Ribbons had come out less than a year before that, and stuff like the Charlottes and the Wedding Present Sea Monsters. I remember that was a big van favorite on our early tours. That's the kind of, I always thought we were going to make kind of a British sounding first album, and I think the songs were very conducive to that thing, and I think that's what this is going to sound like if people hear it. Like that's the vibe that I was pushing for.
You say the wedding present, I'm there.
Yeah,
Good
they
stuff.
were probably our band favorite at the time.
Yeah, what I really like about the remixes, and to be clear, Archie remixed all of this stuff. This has really been his labor here that is coming to fruition. But I like the way the remixes though still sound like the band from that era. They don't sound like, you know, we got Pink's production team to kind of redo it or anything like that. It's trying to find this alternate history of if the recording sessions had maybe just kind of gone a different way, you know, if our headspace had been different with the same material, but in that time period, and not something that the record was not meant to be.
I would agree with that.
Real quick. It's funny. I don't want to use this term because it's so au courant, but it's like it's a multiverse version of the first Velocity Girl album is what it is. Like it's the
that's a great way
because it's the same and yet it's different. It's hard to explain. Like you'll know it when you hear it. You'll see, oh yeah,
that's everything bagel.
Yes.
So Sarah, I gotta ask then, have you listened to some of the
Oh yeah, no,
that's a good question,
frankly, so Archie, Archie's been working his ass off. Like, you know, he's got a job and he's doing this on his off time. And we got a strongly worded text saying, because he's been sending us tracks daily and or very often. And there was a period when we weren't really getting back to him, and he's like, guys,
band asshole.
yeah, right. No, but I think it was completely appropriate. So yeah, we've been listening as they've been progressing.
That's wonderful.
Was that the question? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, like I said, if you haven't seen the Bandcamp reactions from your fans, it's good stuff. Okay, we're gonna wrap it up with vinyl picks. So this is where the artist gets to, the band gets to share albums that they recommend, either on vinyl, CDs, 8-track, cassette, whatever you want. So you're going to get a chance. If you have a couple, you can do them all in a row, and then we'll just go from one person next. And just hold up your album. This was mine. I'm a big fan of The Church, and this is their latest and greatest that came out a couple months ago. And I just heard they're going to have another album that's kind of the brother to this one. So super excited for that. So if you just want to hold up and share what inspires you about the album, that's it. So Jim, do you want to go first?
Sure. I once spent about nearly a year trying to grow my hair out to look like Marty Wilson Piper, and I had brown earrings, and I kind of dyed it burgundy, and it didn't really work. But I like The Church too. Okay, so I'm not sure if this is exactly a recommendation. So, but the first one I chose is Kiss Alive 2 because this was the first album I bought, along with that Beach Boys thing I mentioned, and it's kind of a crappy record. I mean, even as a Kiss fan, it's really not, I don't think, that great, but it's maybe the best still record presentation. This amazing gatefold thing of their stage and these photos on the back. Look at Gene there. So it's a really important record to me. And I bet you there's an infinity number of people in bands relatively our age that had some Kiss record played a huge part in it.
And that record, real quick, that record was the first album I ever owned, and it set a high bar because it came with a fucking book inside of it and tattoos. What else? Was there anything else, Jim?
The doll? Did it come with the doll?
That was Love Gun, or
yeah,
like the paper doll, or
none of that stuff has survived, but all of that stuff was amazing, and I've always felt like the perfect record packaging takes you as long as it takes to listen to the record to read all the liner notes and all that stuff. And also There's this boring stuff you do when you're a songwriter where you join generally either the ASCAP or BMI, these two organizations. And these songs on here are ASCAP. So I think that Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons were ASCAP writers. And I always remembered that because I didn't know what it meant. And then when we had to do that, I remember going, let's do ASCAP because that's what's on Kiss Alive too. So that, and then the next record is an obvious one, but the Ramones' first record, which was played for me by this guy Brian Gallo. There's a handful of records, band photos that I've just studied for, and you can look at this photo absolutely forever, from Tommy's Cub Scout belt, and their weird Keds, and Johnny's finger like this in his pants. It's really incredible. And the record literally, I mean, completely changed the course of my life hearing this record. This, like, metal and all that stuff became irrelevant. Hendrix and classic rock, I put all that stuff aside that I was hearing on the radio and just dove right in, to this. And it's still an absolutely incredible record, especially now. I like all the weird foreign policy rock on the second
Yeah.
and Today Your Love, Tomorrow the World, the sort of like Nazi song and stuff is great. And then the last record is just the most recent record I bought, which is Untenable by Bad Moves. We played with them the other night.
They were great.
I also ordered their record before this, which has this incredible song called Spirit FM. That has been my jam of the week. So I encourage anyone to go and check that out. I bought these both. The other one hasn't arrived yet. I don't know why they came separately, but it's on Don Giovanni, and they're a great band. And so from the beginning until this week, there you go.
Thank you so much. All right, Archie.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure what the criteria was, so I just picked 3 recent obsessions of mine.
Sure.
Which are, some of it is old music, but it's what I've been obsessing over recently. So just got the Sacred Bones reissue of the first Julie Cruz record, which was a record I absolutely loved when it came out, and I stopped listening to it for a few decades, sold the vinyl, kept the CD, I think, and somehow started listening to it again a few months ago. And it's one of those records that, as much as I loved it when it came out, I love it more now. It sounds more perfect to me. So Julie Cruz, Floating.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
Yeah, that was a very sad thing. And then I think this fella Jason Quever might be the Bay Area. It's either Bay Area.
He's Bay Area, yeah.
Yeah. The last Paper Cuts album, Past Life Regression on Slumberland. I love this record. I love the one before it too. I need to kind of get caught up on his previous records. I think he had like a Sub Pop album and some other things, but this is by far the one that I love the most. It has songs that sound like they could be on the Kinks' Village Green, or the Who Sell Out. It's just really perfect. But it's like the Kinks' Village Green or Who Sell Out if they listen to Echo and the Bunnymen too. It's a really cool vibe.
And if I'm not mistaken, sorry, Archie, I believe he filled in. He did some music with Dean Wareham from.
He did that 10-inch. I think it's called Emancipated Hearts, maybe.
Yeah, and he did some touring with him. He filled in. Yeah. So yeah, that's a great.
It seems like a super talented guy. And then finally, I got this Blue Rash. I've been buying up these. There's a guy named Steven Wilson, who I guess is the Porcupine Tree, a prog guy. I'm not really into his music with Porcupine Tree, but it seems like everything else he's ever done is really intriguing to me, where he for a while, I think, got together with all of the surviving members of Japan except for David Sylvian, and he was in a band with them. But anyway, he somehow got the gig to remix like the XTC albums, and this is the Dukes of Stratosphere remixed for surround sound, and but also for stereo. I haven't even listened to, I don't have anything to listen to the surround on, but the stereo remix of this and Skylarking and Black Sea by XTC are just fantastic, which is high praise because those were notoriously great sounding records to begin with. So those are
that guy's created his whole own like demi-monde around all of his endeavors.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's doing like new wave remixes. He just did ABC, the Lexicon of Love. He just remixed
Nice.
that.
Very nice. Yeah, and XTC, Andy Partridge has been all over YouTube because he's not known for doing interviews, but now he's been sharing a lot more of his past.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
check it out.
There's
It's really good.
There's a fun it might have been made for Showtime. There's a fun XTC documentary that I think was one of the first fruits of his kind of becoming friendly and talking to people again.
It's weird how Steven Wilson has all of that stuff you just described, and then probably the bulk of his fan base are also into like Tool and Dream Theater or something like.
Interesting.
Really
Yeah,
weird.
I think of Porcupine Tree as like a cooler Dream Theater or something, like a British Dream Theater or something, but neither is really my bag. So
come on, man.
Believe it or not.
Sarah, we're gonna wrap it up with you. What goodies do you
Right
think?
on. Well, I'm gonna go back to my childhood and the stuff that I was steeped in that, before, I knew what my nose on my face was. My parents probably had the full, between my mom and my dad, had the full Bowie catalog. Oh, that my ring light is kind of. So I remember, and at the time I was really little, and he was such a prolific artist. I remember being so kind of shocked by him visually and a little confused and just sitting there with the records out and looking at him and, asking, is that a boy or a girl? And also, like, his first records confused the hell out of me. I was like, why is he singing like an elf? But I just, those
A gnome,
so,
Sarah, a gnome.
a gnome, yeah. But yeah, so I had all of these, and obviously his voice is everything. And he was still making music. Like, I had MTV, and he was all over MTV. Yeah, I mean, just, yeah, obviously Heroes, like, murders my heart in the best way. Yeah, so another one.
Best song ever, Heroes. It's possible. Yeah. It's pretty close.
Yeah. And then this is another kind of obvious childhood one, but we had all the Beatles records, and this one I just played constantly because it was like the songs were just such perfect pop songs. And then you have this weird ass song at the end where whoever wrote it, was it McCartney or Lennon, where he's threatening to murder his girlfriend.
Oh, Lennon. Run for your life.
When I was little, I was just like, oh, whatever, run for your life. I didn't even know. Right. But in hindsight, I'm like, oh, yeah, that would not fly.
Right.
And then this is probably the first record I ever bought on my own.
Oh, yeah.
Prince's Purple Rain. I mean, what can I say? The whole package. Yeah. He was beautiful. His voice was beautiful. He could dance. He was in the movies. He made his own movies. My sister won tickets to see him on the Purple Rain tour. So I went to see him. And yeah, just.
Yeah, it's one of those albums that literally just has the full gamut. I mean, it's like, and also, if I remember too, that came out at a time where MTV, it's just everything uncorked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And he had the whole package, and he was producing his own stuff. And he was just this weird, beautiful little man. And he had the beautiful voice.
To do enormous things with that talent.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Sir, good.
I was just going to say and whenever someone holds a Prince album up, the first thing now I think of is Sinead O'Connor and her experience. Did you read her book?
Yeah, I read about that.
Oh, goodness. Oh, good stuff.
I think that was a kind of converging of some interesting personalities.
Yeah, some egos involved, all that.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to plug before we wrap this up?
Plug, gosh. Ooh, I'm gonna do a new Sarah Shannon record. I'm working on it right now. Those are the songs.
Oh, look,
Those are the songs right there.
Those- Can
Okay.
you see
Work
them?
wall.
Yeah,
Can't see the
Yeah.
titles, but
Oh,
I
Yeah,
love it.
so, but that's a little bit on the back burner now, which is perfectly fine.
Velocity Girl, thank you so much. Jim Spellman, Archie Moore, Sarah Shannon. This has been a wonderful pleasure, retracing some steps, getting familiar with the where we're going forward with the band, these analog tapes being dusted off, all that. We have some upcoming shows. Can you remind the audience when those shows again will be playing?
September 30th in New York City at Bowery Ballroom with Elk City and Janine's. And then December 2nd in Washington, D.C. at the Black Cat with Tuscadero, who are reforming, and Pogo, our friends from Florida, who are coming up for that show.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all three of you. I really, really appreciate it.